Hello, hello. I have entered. I'm sure you can hear me because this chair is ridiculous. Alright. So now the Liam has baked some and she's ready for another layer. So now I have to decide what kind of a layer am I going to do. Am I going to do the pink layers or the red layers, or am I going to start on more blue? I think at this point I want to do a blue wash. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hang these parts, and then I'm going to start the blue wash. So for my blue wash, basically what I use is the original vein blue from Genesis, and then I just thin it down with thinners. So it's not a thick paint. In fact, most of it is probably going to just kind of roll off. I like to do it upside down because I like for the blues to kind of go up the nose. I like for it to go into the mouth. I like for it to pull over the eyelids a little bit. And so then, once it's kind of drippy, I'm just gonna check to be sure everything has been touched. That's the wash. I'm gonna take a dry brush and I'm gonna pull out some of that extra paint. Pull it out from the creases of her lips too, because I want some of the blue, but I don't want a ton of the blue, particularly around the lips. It's good to have a hint, but you just don't want it to be completely overwhelming. So then I'm going to replace this. And she's going to drip a bit. So I'm just going to keep an eye on her, as I do. Trying to figure out this camera thing, so I'm sorry if it's not the greatest of quality. I am working on it. I figure why not look stupid in front of the whole world. At 44 young years of age, I think I've gotten pretty good at that. Alright, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do the wash on her feet and her legs. And then I'm just going to take off the extra. You can see there that it's just a little bit of a blue hint. Is that better or worse? I don't know. So we'll figure it out as we go. Okay. So you might notice that in the little toe creases, you can have a little bit of paint that kind of gathers there. So I'm just gonna rinse that out just a little bit with a dry brush. Doesn't have to be a brand new dry brush. As long as it has a complementary color and it's not soaking wet, it'll do the trick. Alright, so this is the other foot. Again, I'm just going to add this blue. This really helps to bring out the depth. Really gives it a lot of depth. In fact, this blue wash even really helps to create the illusion of more white that's underneath the pinks and the purples. So I really like using this blue wash a lot because it adds so much plushness, so much thickness to the skin. Every now and again I'm just going to check back because it's going to drain, it's going to drip, and I just don't want the paint to puddle there. So I just keep absorbing it with my sponge. I'm going to do the same thing, the hands and the arms. This is really going to show you where you need to work on depth. So I can see that I need a lot of work here in the palm of the hand to create the illusion of soft skin. I don't want that blue to dry there, so I'm pulling the majority of that paint back out of those creases in the palm of the hand because I still have lots of in-depth work to do down there. And again, I'm just going to soak up that extra paint. Add this blue into the palm of the hand, bring it down from the top of the arm. I like to let gravity help me out with these washes. I can pretty much make the paint go where I want it to go just by moving the limb. I don't want the blues to ever sit on the tips of the fingers. You can after you have enough pink at the tip that it doesn't turn it blue. But what can sometimes happen is if you allow the blue to sit there and there's not enough pink covering the tips, then you're going to end up with that nasty blue fingertip look. And that just looks like there's something wrong with your baby. It gives kind of a sickly look. I'm just going to pull out the extra paint from between the fingers. You can see I still have a lot of work to do, the intricate work between the fingers. So that's going to have to dry up, bake up, and then I'm going to go into that. Again, every time I put a limb onto my rack, which is a lovely mug stand, every time I do that, then I go ahead and take out the extra paint that might be dripping down. Stops it from pooling and puddling and being places where it's not really supposed to be, where you don't really want it. Okay, so now what do I do? So now I've got the wash on, and I have to decide what kind of a layer am I going to do next. Well, I've been thinking about the very pinky baby pink color, and we don't really have a whole lot of that on the stall at this point. So what I want to do is I want to use the Eyelid Micro Vein Red. This is a very bright and happy color. It's quite lovely. And basically, I don't even mix this with anything else at first. I just apply it to the bottom of my ramekin. And I'm not going to be using a ton of this, so I'm just going to put a little bit in there. I like to save my paints because they're very expensive. And then, like I did before, I'm just going to add some thinners until I get it to where I want it. So if I put this on the doll right now, that would look like blood. Or it would look like a burn. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to just keep washing it down with thinners until I get it to the point where it's going to just be a thin layer. So you see how light pink that is as it's coming down? So this is what I want to capture. This is what I want to stick to my doll. Go back to my trusty sponge. So I'm not sure if you can see very well or not. Like I said, I'm still working on the video components. My hubby is helping me. But this is just adding a very thin pink mottled layer over the top of the skin. And this is what I'm wanting for this baby at this point. So this has pinked her up really nicely. Again, I'm going to go back to my trusty dilapidated brush, and I'm just going to push the paint into those hard to reach areas. So that we have a really nice uniform look with the colors. So you can see that there's not a whole lot of the purple that's peeking out anymore. This pink has really neutralized and taken down a lot of the darkness of it, which is what I was wanting it to do. So at this point, I'm going to hang her back up on the rack. I'm going to just let her flash off that thinner. And I'm going to move on to my limbs. Again, I really enjoy working with these layers by starting at the top of the thigh. This is generally going to be the part of the doll that's seen most often. And as I said before, the backs of the limbs are generally just a little bit lighter in color than the fronts. And there are always exceptions to that rule. But this is just kind of how I do it. And then when I reach an area that's a little bit too much down there, then I'm just going to pull it back out with a dry brush. if the modeling is a little too stark in one place or another, then I'm just going to take that dry brush. I'm just going to pull it back out to calm it down a little bit. I'm pretty happy with that one. You can see as I'm working, when I do the wash first, that gives me a nice wet base. So this modeling is not going to be going onto a completely dry surface. So it's going to have a little more workability. It's going to kind of dissipate a little bit, even as I'm applying it. I don't have to work that hard, as you can see, to calm down the color. And I'm just going to calm down a little bit of this here. And you could absolutely leave that. That's not terribly dark. But I'm planning to add a couple more layers on top of this. So I do want it to be a little bit lighter. Because that way I can add the darker colors inside those lighter patches. And what that does is that just gives the illusion of another layer of color, another layer of skin. I'm going to do the same exact thing. And these arms, again, with the arms, I'm going to start up here, the top of the arm. Move down the top side, front side, the posterior of the arm, which is the inside of the arm. It's going to be a little bit less colorful, a little bit lighter. This is true for all of us human beings. And I'm pretty happy with that coloring. Again, this limb is kind of damp. That was the goal for this, because I don't want to be applying paints over dry vinyl. Go down the front, onto the hand a little bit, and then I'm going to start to turn the limb. As I have less and less paint on my sponge, then I'm just going to work that into the more pale areas. Sometimes you'll find the limbs that are not very easy to handle when you're painting them. This is one of those. It's a little slippery, so it keeps trying to get away. Okay. So I'm going to take this down just a little bit. There's still going to be lots more reds that I'm going to be putting in here. And they're going to be different variations of reds. So I don't want a huge thickness of color right now. Take this down a little bit too. This is just very subtle changes that I'm looking for. I'm not trying to take the little spots all the way away. I'm just trying to fade them in to the layer of skin below. So you have a little bit of irritation look, but it's not a really dark, deep color. Okay. So now I'm going to be looking at her. And again, I'm going to be thinking, what am I doing with her color at this point? So right now she's still a little bit wet, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull out some extra paint here around the nose, lips, inside the ear. I like the plush look that I'm getting underneath her puffy eyes. I really like that, so I'm not going to mess with that too much. I'm just going to leave it for the time being. Probably going to bake her one more time once she flashes off and let her cool down, and then we'll move her into the next layer. I believe probably the next layer I'm going to do is another dark blue wash, and then after the dark blue wash, when it's still a little damp, then I'm going to add in the vein blue, which is the lighter turquoise blue modeling, and I'm going to blend that down. So right now I'm just going to let that completely flash. While we're waiting for that to flash, I'm going to dig out of here my blue. So this is the blue that I use. This is back in the day. I think I've probably had this jar of paint for about 10 years. And if you want to see, this is how much I've used out of it. Genesis paints last an eternity. So I need to make more of this dark blue wash. And the way that I do that is I'm just going to take some from the inside here, and then I'm going to put it into my baby food bottle jar. Now that's way too thick. And if we were to put that on the doll, that would override every color we've put on her so far. But when we water it down with the thinners, then it becomes a whole lot more workable. And so we end up with something like this. And you see how that just lightly, when I touch the white, just fades right in. So that's what I want with this wash. Washes are supposed to be very transparent. So you should be able to see through your wash to see the colors underneath. And the goal with the washes is to affect the underlying baked in color and to just kind of tweak it a little bit and take it in the direction that you want it to go. For this particular doll, my goal for her with this next blue layer once she bakes is that we're going to give her an even deeper skin look. So we're going to start to see some of those little veins popping here and there. So since I did the blue and it's flashed a bit already, I'm going to go in and I'm just going to make sure that there are no puddles of blue that are going to dry and bake into this thing. We don't want any blues to bake in. You can see here the tip of her little finger. There's a little bit of blue there. Just dab that off. And then that looks fine. And sometimes I can just take the corner of a dry sponge and just kind of take out the paints that way. I do rewash my sponges. So some of these are from the early 16th century. I enjoy that because it stops me from having to spend so much money on sponges. And if you get really good sponges, then you're going to be able to get a lot of use out of them. I have some sponges here that I like. This one, this guy I've been using probably for about the past 6 or 8 months. And I just keep washing it and reusing it. Alright, well I will be back live once again after this baby bakes out. Again, power level for my new wave is set on 6. Power level 6 for 8 minutes, and that's going to bake that in really well. I have 2 of these big racks that I use when I'm drying dolls. Some of it's to flash off the paint and some of it is to cool. If I'm working on, which I normally work on 3 at a time, and so then I would just continue working, and while one's baking, then it gets out and it gets cooled. Meanwhile, another one's flashing off, so when the next one comes out of the oven, it can go in. So I have a pretty good flow going. So I guess I can take a look at Serenity and just see if there's anything else I might want to do with her. I'm pretty happy with her because she, as you can see, is going to have red hair. She's going to have really pretty auburn hair. So I'm trying to keep her skin tone in the family that's going to look natural with that red hair. And I think she's pretty much there. The only thing that I might do is add a little bit of blue around her mouth and under her eye. So I don't know if you can see that. This turns just a bit purple as you're working it because she's got a lot of really pretty reds in there. And so when you add the blue to that, then you're going to get variations of purple, which is really pretty over the eyelids. I really like that a lot. So then I'm going to go back to my wider brush because I don't want a chance that this guy here has a lot of thick paint that I've not gotten out, and I don't want that to end up streaking her face. So then I'm just going to add this right around here. And then at the same time, before that dries, then I'm just going to add a little bit of the pink over top of that. So she's going to have the hint of the blue, but she's also going to have a little more flesh tone there. And that gives a pretty realistic look, I think. Might add just a little bit more to the lips. And I'm pretty happy with that. So I'm going to let her start to flash. So I really like where she's at this point with her limbs and her fingertips and all that. I like where this color is. So basically what I'm probably going to do is just rebake her and seal her, and then her head's going to be ready to go off to be rooted. Alright, I'm going to take a little break, and then I will be back to do a little more painting this evening before my hubby gets home from work.